Good evening, everyone. This is the meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge. Today is Wednesday, April 10th, 2024. The time now is 7:32 p.m. This meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge is being held remotely and recorded via Zoom due to the Borough Council Chamber's unavailability and is in compliance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act and associated regulations. Notice of this remote meeting was published in the Bergen Record, posted on the front doors of Borough Hall, and posted on the borough's website. The notice included the dial-in and login information necessary for public participation and access to this meeting remotely. A copy of the agenda for this meeting was made available on the borough's website near the posting of the meeting notice and included the dial-in and login information. During the public comment period of this meeting, if you'd like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand button on Zoom or dial *9 on your telephone keypad to raise your hand. The board will address you by name or by the last four digits of your telephone number. You may mute and unmute yourself by pressing the microphone icon on Zoom or dialing *6 on your telephone keypad. You must state your name and address clearly prior to making a public comment. With that, I will turn it to Ms. Steinle. If you would kindly call the roll, please.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mayor,
Here.
Mr. Caslin,
Here.
Ms. Boland is excused tonight. Oh, Mr. Merman?
Okay. Here, I just got on.
Okay, he is here. Okay,
He is here.
we're doing the roll. Mr. Pfeffer,
Here.
Mr. Cray is excused tonight. Mr. Kanigo is excused tonight. Councilman Glass?
Here.
Here, and Mr. Gibbons.
Here.
And Mr. Bastide is excused tonight. Also present, Mr. Behrens and Mr. Depkin.
Okay, thank you much. Our first item of the agenda this evening is the approval of minutes. A draft of the minutes for our March 13th meeting were circulated to the board for review prior to this evening. I open it to the board for comments or questions on the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I reviewed the minutes and I have two minor corrections. If
Okay.
Lisa, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
I can hear you. I can
Okay,
hear you.
okay. On your page 1,
Okay,
the attendance. I think I think the mayor was present, I believe, so he should be marked. Oh, he is present. No, I think he was absent, was he not?
I don't. Marina?
All right. That,
Let me pull up my.
The last meeting, I think I was present for, but I'll double.
Yeah,
check.
I think
Yes.
so. I think
oh,
so
okay,
too.
okay.
The only
that's good.
meetings I've ever missed are meetings that had to do with the D variance of late.
Yeah, okay.
That was the 13th. So that was
Yeah.
the Dark Star. So I
Yeah,
think
this isn't
the
isn't
mayor-
the last meeting. This is 2 meetings ago.
2
Yeah.
weeks.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
true. That's true. That's true.
The
Okay,
mayor was absent for that.
okay.
Okay.
If
Well,
we get down,
excused.
Okay, so it was correct. I was correct?
apparently, yes. Okay, I
Okay.
apologize.
Oh, no worries. Just want to get it right.
But if we go down to Councilman Glass, I believe he was, that excuse should be part-time. Because he voted on the memorialization for the cannabis.
I wasn't at
Oh.
that meeting. The mayor and I weren't at that meeting.
The mayor, no, did you? Well, we recorded you as being a yes on the cannabis of that meeting.
Well, just the one.
Let me.
Is
let
this-
me
We're,
just-
Okay.
we're getting some feedback. Just if you're not speaking, just mute yourself. Thanks.
Dick, I'm sorry, Mr. Merman. So 2 meetings ago, I didn't attend. If it says that, it needs to be corrected. If there's some other reference to me, it might be fine. I'm not sure.
Well, okay,
I'm just pulling up, so for the March 13th meeting, the mayor and the councilman were both absent excused. And same
Right.
with Mr. Bastide.
Yeah, because that was,
So
that was
on
the
the
dark,
front, yeah,
that was the
on the
Dark
front
Star
first page
application,
of the
yeah.
minutes, the mayor needs to be marked as excused, and then on the second page under memorialization, um, you'll just have to eliminate the councilman's vote because he wasn't
Okay.
there, so.
Okay, fine. Now, one other little one, Lisa, but it's important on your page 4. If you pick up page 4, the middle paragraph that starts with Miss Boland wanted to know if you drop down that, if you 5 lines from the bottom, it reads expectancy of the building to which Mr. Folletti responded 75 years. That 75 years should be 75 to 100 years.
200, okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's very important because it's part of the resolution, and all. And that's it. Okay, so then, Mr. Chairman, with those corrections, I recommended the board approve them as noted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Merman. Any further comments, questions from the board? Okay, with the revisions just articulated, I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes for our March 13th meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Is there a second?
I'll second my own motion.
Uh,
All right,
Marina, can we do that procedurally?
so I have a motion from Mr. Gibbons and a second from Mr. Merman.
Okay,
And I'll just call those eligible because there were some absences. Mr. Caslin,
yes.
Mr. Merman,
Yes,
and Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
and Mr. Gibbons.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes.
Okay.
I'll make those changes this evening.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. All right,
you.
moving on our agenda, we're going into memorializations. The first item is Dark Star
Yeah.
Development LLC, Mason Lazar and Paul Imperato. Property is 335 Johnson Avenue, block 1405, lot 3. Resolution is for the denial of an application for amended preliminary and final site plan approval for parking variances. A draft of the resolution was circulated to the board for review prior to this evening's meeting. I open it to the board for comments and or questions on the draft presented.
Mr. Chairman, I reviewed this one and let me just make sure. I think we might have no, it's not on this one. It's on Bogut. Okay. So this one is okay. I find the my review that it's very, very thorough and covered the situation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Merman. Any other comments on the board? Questions?
The only other comment, I have to update the vote chart on this resolution. I had an old one in the back of it, so I'll just update it with all the correct votes.
That's all I had, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, on that.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments on the board? Okay, at this time, I'll look for a motion to approve the resolution as drafted.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeffer. Ms. Steinle, when you're ready.
All right, thank you. Mr. Caslin,
Yes.
Mr. Merman,
Yes,
Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
and Mr. Gibbons.
Yes.
The motion passes and I only called those eligible.
Okay. Thank you very much. The next item under memorializations. The applicant is Suzanne Laquette. Address is 820 Bogert Road. This is block 205, lot 1. Resolution granting the variance for maximum improved lot coverage. A draft of the resolution was circulated to the board prior to this evening's meeting, and I open it to the board for comments or questions on the draft resolution.
Mr. Chairman, Marina, did we have the same problem with the last page on this one with the councilman and Jim Alcarian and Mr. Esposito?
It might have been. If so, I'll change that.
Okay, fine. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, I find the resolution as recorded to be very acceptable and recommended for approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Merman. Any other comments, questions from the board? Okay, at this time I'll look for a resolution, excuse me, a motion to approve the resolution as drafted.
So
You
moved.
guys?
Okay, I got a first, Mr. Gibbons, there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeffer. Ms. Steinle?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Merman,
Yes,
Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
Councilman Glass,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes, and again, I only called those eligible to vote.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Steinle. We're going to move now into the next topic this evening under discussion. Our first item is the proposed ordinance to amend zoning regulations Exhibit A. The draft date of March 7, 2024. And the continuance of the discussion of the ordinance amendments in order to submit recommendations to the Borough Council. So, Mr. Merman, I am going to ask if you would kindly just take the lead on this particular item since I was absent from the last meeting and I did get a chance to catch up on the transcript. I would ask
Well-
for indulgence to take the lead on this particular topic.
okay, and I'm gonna pass it off to Tom Behrens, because he was the sort of the spokesman and leading that discussion for the mayor and the councilman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Merman. I will give credit to Marina, who's she's really the author of the document and I think did the latest update. So I just want to give credit where credit is due. So Marina, let me ask the board this, because there was some discussion last time. Should we simply focus on the coverage issues or go through the whole thing? What do we want to chew on tonight? Do we want the whole thing, run through the whole thing in the updates, or just focus on one particular aspect for recommendation to council?
Well, I think the mayor's goal was to get a final draft that he could recommend to the council, the mayor and council.
All right.
That is correct.
Yeah,
Then-
I think we're going to want to go through the whole thing, Tom.
Okay, then Marina, in that case, can you share?
Yep, I'm just pulling up. I'm realizing I didn't share the edits from the prior meeting and now my computer is going slowly, but I will be sharing my screen momentarily if I can get it up.
If you have a problem, I can probably do it too. So give you a minute.
So just so we know, there wasn't anything sent to us, right? I didn't miss anything from our last meeting and our last discussion.
No,
Thanks.
I thought I sent it out, but I think I only sent it to a few of the team members. Okay.
So I'll make sure I didn't miss anything.
I can get started just discussing on Exhibit A, which is the schedule of zoning district requirements. What we talked about at the last meeting was changing the improved lot coverage maximum to 37% from 35 for all the residential zones. And then
So Marina, that was,
adding a 5% with the reserve shall not be interpreted to provide an additional 5% of improved lot coverage, but shall be included in the total calculation of the improved lot coverage.
so Marina, the 37% was debated. It was not affirmed. Some thought we should stay with 35, some thought we had 37. But if, and please, anyone on the board, correct me, I believe the 5% as inclusive was agreed upon, at least there was a consensus on that. But there was not a consensus on the 35 or 37. Is that the recollection of the rest of the group?
I thought we had formed consensus around 37%. I don't think we necessarily voted on it and people were subject to changing their mind, but I think most people expressed that they were comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with 37% if those present here aren't comfortable with the 37%.
I'll just add, there was a revelation, I think toward the end of the last meeting where we discussed creating discounts essentially for certain types of paving materials as well as decking. So that relates to the overall coverage. So I guess the question is it 37% plus the discounts? What are those discounts? So I think that idea had a lot of traction.
Okay.
And Marina, you came up with sample language for that. And so feel free to share that.
Yes,
And I guess
so-
the board can react to that.
So
Mr. Behrens, and I believe it was, it was a good suggestion that Mr. Gibbons made, that we recognize that there can be permeable ground surface coverings. And I think it was with the 35 and allowing recognition of the discount for permeable ground surface coverings.
That was my understanding at the end. We were either going to do 35 with the discounts or 37 without the discounts.
Now, even though this was my suggestion, I guess I have a question about my own suggestion. What would fall into that area? So I know decking. So are there, and I guess my further question is, what are other towns allowing? So, how, I don't know, Miss Diley, I don't know if you were about to tell us some wording, but how do we designate what is more permeable? And are there certain brands or how do we designate that, I guess, is my simple question.
Well,
yes, so my computer is not cooperating, so I'll just ask Tom if you could share.
yeah, I'll offer. So towns do it differently. So you have some flexibility in how you want to do this, and it runs the gamut. I think it makes sense to create two categories. The first category would be decks, unroofed decks with no paving underneath, right? So you have treads, which could be wood, they could be composite, with gaps in between that allow for water percolation. And so Hillsborough, for instance, discounts the whole thing, doesn't count as impervious coverage. Whereas other towns might give 25% or 50%. Personally, I think 100% may be on the high end. But you have between 0% and 100% with examples in between. Hillsdale, I think, discounts it. I think, Ed, do you know if does Hillsdale discount decks or just pavers?
Both.
Okay.
I don't quite remember. I know favors for sure.
Right. So I think in Hillsdale, they give 25% for decks, I think.
So-
Or Marina, maybe you have
But-
that information.
I took the language from the Hillsdale zoning ordinance because I think it provides a good balance for the reduction. Surfaces such as brick, pavers, laid stone, slate, or timber with open joints shall constitute 50% of improved lot coverage. And surfaces such as gravel, loose stones, and special paver stones with voids for grass shall constitute 25% improved lot coverage. So this would provide some people with some flexibility. Instead of putting a big concrete slab, they could use pavers and get a reduction.
And does that actually, it does allow, I mean, maybe Mr. Glass, you're the engineer, Mr. Merman, that does allow enough water to go through, so if you have pavers, it shouldn't create water issues for neighbors and all that. It should allow the water to go through. Is that accurate in most cases?
It depends on the product, but that's the concept, yes.
Okay.
Well, I would just add, there are there's permeable pavers and then there's traditional pavers. So some towns don't distinguish. They just say pavers get a discount. Others will say they've got to be permeable pavers. I just saw tonight, there's an ordinance in Teaneck that discounts, I think it's 100% of permeable pavers. And they define permeable pavers. So again, there's some flexibility. So again, you could create two separate categories, decks, and we'll call it paving, or, at grade surfaces, which could include gravel, stone. So it's a question of what you want to include. And if you want to distinguish between, permeable, which refers to the product specifications, or just simply say stone paving materials.
I think where Mr. Gibbons is going is we need some definitions,
Okay.
right, for
Yeah,
different types of.
if there's a product that's going to be better, then I'd rather give that person more credit than someone that's not using, if there is a really permeable, I'm not saying 100%, but I would rather give that person more credit than.
You
So-
really can't refer to a product per se. I know what you're going
No.
for, but you can't talk to, I think probably the better way, the better milepost is to say that the material allows for a certain amount of drainage,
Right.
defined that using the engineering technical that.
Yeah, just,
know.
generic definitions.
You know, it's gotta, it's gotta basically allow for X amount of water to come through, something to that.
Whatever
effect.
that is, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
If I might add, my concern with using a discount for permeable pavers is that, yes, they're permeable right off the bat if you keep them maintained and cleaned, but if people let them go astray, they don't actually permeate water. And so then it's an issue of, yes, there's all these permeable pavers, but they're still over time they become impervious. So
can
that's
that-
why I would lean against that.
Can that be addressed though by a requirement? How we have our standard requirements, when we give relief that says that you need to maintain, there's an ongoing maintenance obligation, if you will, and that the failure to maintain is subject to a violation.
Yep, that could be a possibility. Then it becomes an enforcement issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could also, so that it doesn't become an enforcement issue, we could say 75% of claim permeability or 50% of claim permeability. So say a paver is 80% permeable. We could say, well, because there is a maintenance concern, we're only going to give them 50% of the permeability. And that creates language that then this body can address at the moment. And the resident will know when they come to us. Because if we add an enforcement, let's be honest, it won't be enforced.
Could there be something that, because you're going to find out about it when the neighbor starts getting water in their basement.
Yeah.
So could there be something that if reported, not that we're going to ask our zoning officer to go around and check these properties, but if the neighbor, reports it, our zoning officer goes and says this, this is not functioning, could there be some sort of fine or expectation of having it fixed in a certain period of time or something like that? Is that realistic?
No.
It gets
Obviously,
very tricky, yeah, when you're.
Yeah, I would leave it to Marina and to Tom to expound on, but basically then it becomes a subjective determination.
Okay, just throwing out, I just throwing out an idea.
It's a good idea. It's hard to measure performance over time is what it comes down to. How is it performing day one? Was it installed correctly versus we had a 100-year storm and 8 inches in one day, and now they're seeing water. And yeah, it's a lot of,
Right.
You get into those situations and
Understood.
it gets hairy. So it'd be better to avoid that situation, frankly.
Okay, understood.
So, I brought up the issue of permeable pavers. Again, you can choose to distinguish between those and others. And I agree that the performance dwindles over time if not properly maintained. And my understanding is that maintenance is basically like vacuuming out the pores or sweeping up, so the pores don't get clogged. That's the issue, is that the pores get clogged. And yeah, it probably doesn't get done routinely in most circumstances, but it's an option that some towns have relied on.
So
And-
simply because I work with Artie DeRosa on a regular basis and we get the complaints from residents on a regular basis, I think from an administrative point of view and an enforcement point of view, it's much better just to say 50% or 75% or 25% of product claim. And that then, because enforcing whether it was taken care of correctly, and then was this 100-year storm and therefore we shouldn't be held accountable, it ties up borough resources. And we already operate on a skeleton crew, when it comes to our full-time and part-time employees. But, this body can recommend what it wishes.
Yeah, I don't think I think to the extent we can limit enforcement issues, that's what we're aiming, while achieving the goals we're trying to achieve. I think that's the mantra, but
On this note of permeable surfaces, would this include a sport court that has, I believe a lot of those have pretty big holes in them and allow water to go through, or is that something we don't even want to get into?
If this body wants to consider that, that's fine. As again, I would say that we would have to create a percentage of claim of permeability and use that for the ordinance. But
Yeah. My suggestion would be not to I think we should regulate surfaces, right? Not the function of the surface. So for example, we had in there flag poles and sport, like you were saying, Ryan, sports courts. I don't know what that means really. What are we regulating? I think, we want to maximize recharge, right? And we want to maximize use of permeable surfaces. So let's just work around that. What's the surface? And how are we going to regulate the ground surface cover? Instead of because like you said, one sports court could be totally different than another, and they don't really match a given permeability per se, each sports court, depending on what kind of sport it is, what the use is, how it's constructed. What really matters is what the ground surface covering is and how permeable or impermeable it is.
Right.
Was there also a use component too with the sport court? The drainage was first and foremost, but was there any concern with the actual use or installation, having that ability to look, to review those applications that do come up? Because, if a neighbor, if an applicant comes in, a resident wants to put in a sport court, whatever that might be, should there be some level of review that the board maintains, in terms of the effect of the use on the surrounding properties?
if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think that that's the second round, not this round of
Okay.
changes. I think that's a very, very important question. Side yard versus backyard. Those, residents should not have to look at it. And during COVID, we were kind of generous in our understanding of this. But I think that's very much something that should be in the second round. I just wouldn't want to bog down this round with it.
Fair enough.
I only brought it up because it was I believe it was in that draft ordinance. And I think on my time on this board, I've only seen one application that we ever addressed it.
Right.
You know, where someone had put it in and it was over, you know, over the limit. So, pass it on to next time. That's fine.
Yeah, I think there are some people who put it in without permission and they may come up, so it would be good for us to deal with it. If we could in the second round.
Perfect.
Okay.
So maybe just to, I guess to come up with some conclusions. So what I've heard so far is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the board wants to stick with the 35% improved lot coverage, as it's called, which we can change the terminology, but 35% with the minimum 5% reserve for amenities, as well as a discount for certain surfaces, which we still need, I guess, clarity on. That seems to be the final point. How much of a discount and what materials or surfaces?
Maybe I can throw that out. How feels the board about 50% of claimed permeability?
I think it's a good approach.
If we don't think that that's going to cause issues, if we think that's, you know, it's accepting enough water, then I'm all for it.
Do we want to think about starting small and working upwards if it's working, or
25%?
yeah, I'm just thinking maybe it might be more judicious. We just start small, see what the impact is ultimately, and if it's something where, you know, it looks like it's working, maybe we can go a little bit above that, but just a thought.
I'm not sure how we're gonna evaluate that.
We would simply say they would have to present the engineering claim of the product and then discount it by 75%. Marina,
So would there would not be a discount for decks that have spaces between joints?
no, we're just talking about, we're talking about pavers and sports courts right now. I think the decks are something different and the pools are something different. Unless I'm
Okay, so
missing what the board was talking
only a
about.
discount for permeable surfaces, and it'll be 25% of the claimed permeability.
I think that's where we are right now. Then we can talk about decks and we can talk about pools.
Are we aware of the towns that have done this having problems?
I'm not aware. I mean, I'll ask maybe Ed. Do you want to? I mean, you've been on the
We've had
Hillsdale
no
board.
problems. And we offer 50% discount for permeable pavers. And we've never had an issue that I know of.
What was that percent?
50.
50.
And so obviously the percentage translates to square feet, right? So if the maximum patio you were allowed to have was 200 square feet, you can now do a patio of an extra 100 square, right? I think my math's right. 300 square feet, right? 50% discount. Right? Did I do that right?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem with starting small and then going up is later on, you kind of cheated the original people out of their upgraded percentage later on.
Yeah,
Miss-
I only suggest 25 just because I know the challenges we've had with water in the town, and I know the capital that the town has outlaid to try to address those issues. And what I would not want to have happen is for us to recommend an action that basically turns all of that on its ear.
Well, I would be comfortable with the 50% if we keep it to 35. If we go to 37, then I would want 25%. If we're going to keep the impervious coverage to 35%, I don't know, Councilman Glass, you know, what are your thoughts from an elected point of view?
Sounds like there's a precedent for the 50%, so that might be a good place to land.
I would think that I'd rather do a 50 than a 37 because the 37 could be complete concrete.
Yeah,
You know, at least we have some control over this, that it has to be a certain product or certain material. Yeah, because then you can't just put a big concrete patio in your backyard, you know, for that extra 2%.
I'm fine with the 50 if the consensus is 50. I merely was just trying to play devil's advocate a little bit, but I'm
Sounds
okay with the
good.
50.
I mean, we could always we could always pull it back. I can't imagine it's not like this is, you know, it's going to get around to every corner of the town that now you can add, you know, more patio. I don't know that we're going to have a million applications because of this.
I'm
mean,
comfortable
could
with
be
that if
wrong.
everybody else is.
There's there's two other aspects to consider other than the coverage. There's one, we have setbacks. The ordinance requires 5-foot setbacks from property lines. So I'm not suggesting changing that, but that's another parameter that, you know, protects adjacent properties. And whether or not there's a certain threshold which would require on-site water management, meaning like a seepage pit or something like that. So I don't know, Steve, do you want to opine on that? I don't want to create trouble where there's not trouble and, you know, make things more onerous, but you know, maybe if a patio is, let's say, above a certain size, that would trigger the need for some kind of stormwater management intervention. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Thanks, Tom. I think you have to rely on our borough engineer in regards to some of these items. I think Tom hit on a good point that the setbacks on the property are very slim, very narrow. So if you have a court, again, I don't know what a sports court is. I can think of a basketball court. I don't know if anybody's going to put a tennis court or a pickleball court or anything like that on. But if that's close to the property line, you're going to get a major portion of runoff onto a neighbor's property. So I think maybe you want to think about a requirement, a larger setback for patios or, you know, paved areas, things of that nature. As far as the percentages go for permeability, I think Marina was on point that these tend to clog very quickly. And people don't tend to clean them out. I think it would be difficult for me to go around, and even if I get a complaint that there was a water problem, to point it to the patio, and they would have to show me that it's not, you know, it's not running off or so that would be very difficult. Some towns, the town that I'm full-time in, we rely on the engineer to determine the specifications of the product being used. So if it's permeable pavers, what is it? What do the specifications say? And then they reduce it, even further than that with the fact that you're going to get cloggage. As far as decks, yeah, you stand on a deck and it's raining, or you stand under a deck and it's raining, you're going to get wet. The issue being what's under the deck. You're not going to have, concrete or pavers, but somebody might want to put stones, and in order to eliminate weeds, they'll put plastic under the stones. So, I mean, I think there's criteria that needs to be covered for that type of situation. And that's all. I mean, there's a lot of new products coming out, but I think all of them need to be maintained. And if that's the case, then, it's up to the homeowner to do so. But I think the bigger setbacks you have, the more chance you have of that property's, stormwater percolating into their property.
So are we looking now at a setback change, to address those issues? Or Tom, I think you had also mentioned water management, additional water management.
My point is that there's a few components of the ordinance that control how water impacts neighbors. And I was just pointing out that the current setback is 5 feet, which a lot of existing patios have been built to 5 feet. Some are less than 5 feet because they were done, decades ago. So I mean, that's a policy decision, and what would be the right number? And maybe side yard versus rear yard is different. Of course, we have a hilly town, so it's impossible to make it right for every single situation, right? You do your best to try to address the majority or average situation. So I mean, it's a question: is 5 feet the right number? In consideration of allowing for potentially an increase of paving. It's a question. If 5 feet's the right number, then you keep it. If you want to increase it, we could look at that. And I don't think, because our lots are relatively small, I don't think you could go beyond, let's say, 5 or 10 feet. I think by then maybe you get a little constrained.
Oh.
And we also have to consider, again, we have those issues with corner lots that are non-conforming, where basically the back of somebody's house is 10 feet from the property line. They might be impacted in some way. But again, you can't address every single situation. That's why the MLU allows for variances and for people to come to the board for unique situations.
Ed wants to say something.
Yeah, can I just add something? You might want to consider a different percentage if a house is in a flood zone, a verified flood zone, which is a different situation than if they're not in a flood zone. You're going to obviously see more water in a flood zone area. Just I'm throwing it out there.
On a typical application that's not coming to us, does the town engineer get input into the need for stormwater? Or is it just when it comes to us?
No, when the project is presented to us, and say it's new construction, it's stormwater management is a part of that product, and the engineer does get involved. I think what you're doing here is you're putting aside 5%, so you're reducing the size of the structure. When somebody wants to go in and put a building or a house on a property, you're reducing that down to either 35 or 37%. But now you're reducing it 5% for accessory uses. So you're basically in the same area where you are. You're just trying to restrict further the areas that you want to set aside for decks and patios and that item. So you're kind of still in the same ballpark. You just reduce the building structure by 5%, and then from that point on, is everybody going to do a deck? If they do a structure and you have just grass rear yard, they're going to want to do something, so whether it's a deck or whether it's a patio, I think those items, if they're incorporated, if they want to incorporate them now, because you're giving them a set aside, maybe a contractor will put a deck on, or maybe they will put a patio on. If that's the case, then the engineer will calculate that into the stormwater management design.
But if I have a property that's 25% covered and I want to put in a big patio, does that go to the town engineer to decide if I need stormwater management? So that's I guess more my question. So, because if it's no, then maybe there's some other mechanism that might need to force them to do some stormwater.
I think yes. If an applicant requires a soil moving permit, Rob's office does look at stormwater management and sometimes requires them to include seepage pits or swales and drains.
So just wondering if
even if it was otherwise compliant.
Yeah, and if we're giving this, and I don't know if we need to, but just to mitigate the potential issue of allowing for this percentage. And I don't know how much work that actually ends up being. And is that cost prohibitive for us? Do we need to check on making them when they are made bigger? Do we need to have a check and balance?
it's costly to the applicant because if you're going to have them do stormwater management for a patio or a deck, they have to present their engineering proposal to the borough engineer, and that brings up the price. So
Yeah.
they might be restrictive.
Remember, we can't achieve perfect. We just can achieve practical. And you know, I think since we're holding it to 35, and we seem to have a consensus on 50% of the claimed permeability, that's a good place to start. And if we have to come back to it, we can come back to it. I would recommend that we start talking about pools and decks so that we could come to a consensus about the ordinance, because it appears that we're going to need for it to come one more time before this body because we're making changes again, which is fine. But, you know, then it delays when it gets to the council, and therefore it delays when it gets to the building department, and it delays when we start curtailing some of what's happening with the builders. So if that's acceptable, Mr. Chairman, I think we should talk about decks and pools at this point.
Sure, happy to do so. I just want to know for the record, Mr. Canigo has joined us at 8:16 p.m. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I'm sorry I was late, everyone. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, so why don't we address pools at this point? It seems like a good.
Can I comment on that? I think,
Sure.
and when I talked to Rob Costa, I was a bit surprised that they count the pools as 100% impervious. Normally, your top grade of the water is about 6 inches, 5-6 inches from the coping, and any major storm, that area will not fill that amount of water into that pool. So I would think that you would want to take the pools out of that criteria, and also maybe the decks also, as long as you have permeability underneath the deck.
Yeah, I think the issue is when the pool's covered in the winter or the off months, and I don't know what type of permeability those tarps have, if any.
Yes.
Actually, I can speak to that because I actually have a pool in my backyard, and I've had both types of covers, the ones that are like trampoline covers that are tight.
Yeah.
And also the ones that kind of fall in that are held up either by weights or filled water. They're permeable. And in the winter, the pool gets brought down, the pool water gets brought down significantly, so that it ends up being a giant basin for whatever water falls. I don't have to refill it by the spring because all the water that falls eventually raises it, and then maybe I just have to add a little bit. So it actually is a positive in terms of what we're talking about, the pools, because they do gather water. And but the covers was your question. Those are permeable. The water goes through.
Okay, so I think your point is valid, Steve, that I'm not sure they need to be counted as impermeable surfaces.
I think just the decking or the patio around it obviously would need to, but
Right.
I agree as well. I mean, I've always seen it as you have all of this extra space where the biggest storm is never filling these pools.
Mhm.
You know, as long as, I mean, maybe it needs to be that you have to have one of these covers. You know, if you are over that, you have to have a cover that is permeable.
It's actually, it seems like based on what Mr. Chingo just described to us, it actually holds water. So
You don't
it's
have-
almost a positive with respect to runoff.
Bruce.
Yeah, I just have a question about that. I don't profess to be an expert on pools, but I did have a pool for a number of years. And my understanding was always, and this is just from, people telling me this, was that a deep in-ground pool actually can create some flooding problems for neighbors because the space that it takes up underneath and the material, whether it's, I don't know if it's concrete or whatever the basin is made of actually prevents the saturation of the soil from going anywhere. And so what happens is, again, just from what I was told, is that where you have a lot of groundwater, for example, I used to live on Valley Road, and everybody's basement would flood from the bottom up. It wasn't, you know, it
Sure.
was right. So it was
Yeah.
always the question of the water underground had nowhere to go. And so I'm just, you know, raising it as a
Yeah,
question.
it's displacing where groundwater could
Yeah.
rise.
And I was always told that that was a function of having having an in-ground pool.
So are you saying that it had a negative effect on the water table?
Yeah.
Right.
I
So
would
I'm
have to
wondering-
imagine that also is a function of where you are within the town. There's lower and higher elevations. And by valley over there, you have all the creeks and the streams back there.
Sure.
So that's very different than other areas of River Edge, which are higher up. So I think some sort of accounting has to be made for that as well. And I hadn't heard what you said, but I have no reason to think that it's inaccurate in any way. So it's possible. Yeah.
So what about then we say the pools get 75% of, because that'll, does that sound like instead of giving them 100% permeability, the pool part, not the apron part, but we give them 75% or 50% of their potential permeability?
Should we get some more testimony from experts on this? I mean, I think we're just kind of flying blind here. I certainly don't profess to be an expert just because I have a pool, you know, and
I just don't know who those experts would be and when we could get them.
I think
Tom, can you?
I think the borough engineer would help out greatly.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely an issue that's come up in other towns too, and it's a question of what are you trying to regulate, frankly? Is it permeability? Is it simply man-made features, meaning how much of the, you know, open space are you leaving on your lot? And also it's the, you know, impacts to groundwater if there are any. So every town treats it differently. Some towns have zero discount and some say they're totally impervious and some give a, you know, somewhere in between 50% discount. So again, it depends on what you want to regulate. If you're going to treat in ground and above ground as the same, that's a decision to make. And just to be clear, the thing that we currently regulate in River Edge is not actually impervious coverage. It's called improved lot coverage. So we can change that to impervious if, you know, to make this more clear. But the improved lot coverage really, I mean, based on how I read it, seems to relate more to man-made improvements and, you know, that coverage of the land, not necessarily, it doesn't speak to impermeability at all, really, in terms of the definition. So I just wanted to draw that distinction so we can modify that so we can get to a place to create these discounts. And if really what we're trying to regulate is, you know, again, impervious coverage, we can do that directly, I think. So that's how other towns think
that's
about
not a bad idea. And also to what Bruce had said before, doesn't every basement affect the underground water table? So every property already has these obstructions to groundwater. I think that changing it from improved lot coverage to impervious lot coverage seems to make sense. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
I think it makes sense. So to go back to my question earlier, so if I assume if you're putting in a big pool, there's going to be the soil issue, right? Soil movement permit. So wouldn't that trigger Mr. Costa having to look at this and determine whether, you know, further water mitigation would be needed?
So are you
above
saying
ground
you
would
could
be
say
different.
100% because Mr. Costa's going to have to look at it anyway?
Well, but the flip side, I mean, well, yeah, okay. So an above ground wouldn't cause a problem with the water table. So if it's going to cause a soil movement permit anyway, and it's already going to trigger the town engineer to have to look at it, then I think that certainly covers us better in that regard. And the neighbors.
Are we back to 100% for pools or some small discount?
I think we have to give a small discount because just as a practical matter, when the rain falls, the pool gathers the rain.
No, let me rephrase that. Are we going to say that a pool gets 100% discount or a 25 or 50% discount?
Oh.
And we're talking about in-ground pools, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're talking about in-ground pools.
I don't know if the above-ground pools get the same type of cover.
No,
that-
and there's some argument to be made that above ground pools technically can be dismantled at the end of the season, so it's not a permanent, it's not as quote unquote permanent, if you will, as an
Well,
in-ground.
some are and some aren't, you know,
Some-
you have the Intex ones that you buy at, Walmart, and then the other ones that are metal, steel, there's definitely different varieties of
Different
them.
varieties, yep.
You know, I think it goes back to what the mayor said earlier, that there's no one size fits all. There's no perfect answer that's gonna solve it all the way around for every block of the neighborhood. But so I think 50% is just kind of a imperfect but practical accommodation.
I would also suggest 50 just because at least there's recognition of this as being, the board, we are taking some action toward recognizing that there is some positive benefit to, the feature of an in-ground pool, that it does serve to collect some of the stormwater while, affording the applicant or the resident the opportunity to make the improvement if they so choose.
I'm comfortable with that. I don't know about everybody else.
And could we say the same for wood decks without any concrete, stone, or plastic underneath? That those could also be, if they have joints that allow water through, that could also be a 50%
So
bonus.
let me ask this on this particular question, and I really just don't understand it, so I'm not arguing one way or another, but if it rains and I've got a deck with wood slats and underneath there's earth and the rain goes underneath, how is it not permeable? Like,
Well, I mean, from a science teacher point of view, what would happen is grass area has worms, it's aired. When you don't have grass, you don't have and I could be wrong on this because I'm just a science teacher, I'm not an engineer. But when you don't have, when you don't have an ecosystem because the sunlight kills it, it tends to pack. And the packing makes it less permeable. At least that was my understanding when we would talk about ecology and things like that, when I would teach ecology. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was my understanding.
I think I would be more inclined to allow more for a deck, because even on that point, if it is more compact underneath a patio is now, granted, there's going to be stone and other layers of stuff, but underneath all of that is compacted soil. So I think I'd be more inclined to allow a little more for a deck because of what Mr. Canigo said. I mean, it's going through, like, as long as there's a gap. I know there are some products out there that will not allow any water penetration to go through. But I'd be more inclined, I think, to allow more for a deck, because I just think more is easily getting through with a gap. Even if it is, like, as you said, Mr. Mayor, more compact underneath, but I still think it's still compact underneath a patio as well.
and I would say also, as long as there's earth underneath, not some, crushed gravel packed down so that it doesn't allow the water through or something like that, just.
What really matters, guys, so different surfaces have what they call runoff factors. And runoff factor depends on the nature of the surface and the slope of the surface. So it's more how quick the water runs off the surface to somewhere else than how quickly it can recharge. In River Edge, we're not getting a lot of recharge. So it's more retention. It's the rate at which it intensifies and accumulates and runs off the property. So a gravel surface, like the mayor was saying, a grass surface in a just unlandscaped soil surface, they're all gonna have different runoff factors. And the rate at which it runs off is really what creates a concern. Pavement obviously being the worst, right? It's just gonna run off based on the grade.
How about just, let's consider just maybe to take a poll vote, 50, 75, or 100% based on the conversation. Where are we? I would be comfortable with 50 or 75, just to throw it out.
Me too.
Can I
agree.
just ask a clarifying question for Mr. Glass?
Sure.
So with your statement there, is a deck going to have a better runoff than a patio?
No, I think it depends, again.
I know it depends on other
Well,
circumstances, but apples to apples.
I think he froze.
We lost
Yeah.
him.
I lost him.
There he is.
He's
He's back.
I'm back, I'm sorry. If you have a deck and there's spaces between the deck, the water's gonna hit the surface beneath the deck. So it depends on the surface beneath the deck, like the mayor was saying. Right? So, I mean, I think we can give a large discount for a deck that has spaces between the treads.
Okay, so you think a deck is a better surface for our conversation than a
Sure,
patio?
yeah,
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
because the water's gonna run, it's not gonna go anywhere, it's just gonna go down.
Yep.
So it doesn't cause runoff. That's really what this is about, is runoff.
And you'd have the runoff anyway, whether the deck was there or not. I think was what is, if I'm taking it one.
Same
step
run,
further.
right?
Then I'd be okay with probably 75%.
I'm good with 75.
Me too.
Yeah, I could go with 75.
Same.
Okay, so we did pools, we did deck, and we did any type of impervious surface that is not a pool or a deck. Brings us back to whether we want to do the offsets, I don't think we need to do that, because by incorporating the 5% into the 35%, we're essentially looking for them to do the same amount of coverage that they're currently doing.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you remember, Tom, or anybody on the board? A couple of years ago, there was somebody who created a basketball court out of like certain tiles, whatever. Have we accounted for that type of surface?
It was touched on. We didn't get into it specifically. So, the way it would currently be viewed is, I think you would look at it probably as an accessory structure, maybe. The ordinance doesn't specifically address it. So we're at a point we probably should.
Not to interrupt you, but I thought we did. I thought we said that we would look at whatever the engineering claim was and give it a 50% discount. Am I wrong?
I heard that also. It's not, because we didn't want to get into definitions of what was a sports
What's
court.
a sport court? Yeah, that was the thing everybody was having a challenge with.
Whether it was a permeable surface or not.
Right.
And then we would leave, Dario, we'd leave it to the second round to whether to, should it be a side yard, a backyard? When should this be permitted and when it should not? Simply so we didn't end up spending 6 months on this ordinance and we could move it forward. Because right now we're just talking about permeable coverage and its effect on water. We absolutely have to talk about those other things, but if we could move one version forward and then the second version.
I'm sorry, it popped into my mind and I just didn't want to.
No, it's a good question.
All right, thanks.
Marina, Tom, have we dealt with all the questions we needed to deal with?
The one question that I would have remaining is we discussed previously changing the terminology from right now we have the definition lot coverage, which essentially in almost every other town, they consider lot coverage as building coverage. So I have that as a change throughout, that term lot coverage will be now called building coverage. And then as it stands right now, I have the term improved lot coverage throughout the ordinance, but we just discussed that we're gonna update the definition to align with impervious lot coverage, and then I'll change the definition throughout. Or change the term throughout the ordinance.
I couldn't even begin to weigh in on that. I would think that would be something maybe Councilman Glass or Dick Merman or somebody else could weigh in on, or maybe Steve Dempkin. I'm good with whatever you guys think to make it easier for the public.
Okay.
I agree with changing to building coverage. It makes any structure, that's your calculations go to. And I would just make it simple and make the second lot coverage. So anything that's collected other than building coverage, so it would be included in that. So it would be building coverage plus any other impervious area would be lot coverage. So
Would that
whatever's
include driveways?
Yes. Anything that's covering the property, impervious would be considered lot coverage.
Steve, what if they have a separate garage?
Lot coverage, building coverage and lot coverage.
So separate garage is a lot coverage.
It would be both. It would be calculated for building coverage and it would be calculated also as lot coverage. When I do the review, I review both.
Right, but lot coverage also includes other impermeable surfaces, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Anything else to cover on the topics?
I think we've all agreed that it's 35%, not 37%, correct?
Right.
And we've all agreed that the 5% is part of the 35. And to make it fair, we're doing these discounts.
Yes.
Marina, are you clear with all the discounts?
Yes, so what I have is a 50% discount of claimed, based on claimed permeability for pervious surfaces. In-ground swimming pools will have a discount of 50% for impervious lot coverage. And wood decks with, or with decks with
75.
with spaces and nothing underneath will have 75% discount. I think that's everything. We're not doing
Wait,
the
wait,
change.
do we talk about above ground pools?
Above ground pools, we did not discuss, but those are covering us. They're covering a portion of the grass, so they wouldn't have, they would potentially collect some water. But it's not the, it wouldn't be the same effect as collecting runoff. It would just collect rainwater. So I don't know if you want to give a discount for that. I also included a change saying that seasonal pools are not considered impervious coverage because those are the ones that are inflatable and can be removed, but above ground pools could be considered. So those sturdier metal ones.
Well, I think we should have a definition for that because didn't we have a above ground pool come to us once or twice?
We'll have for years and have decks on them and things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's been a few. Yeah.
We've had
Yeah,
a
we've
few
had
of
some.
them.
So we're on the 0, 25, 50, 75 to 100% discount, are we?
So we think that it's not, so it's collecting rainwater, it's not helping with runoff, but is it hurting runoff?
Yeah, I'm not sure I get the distinction, Marina, that you're making between in-ground and above-ground pools.
So above ground pools, there are two types. There's the seasonal and the non-seasonal. They've come before this body before. We've had debate about it. So I'm just making sure that we have a consensus. before we ask Marina to do another version, because another version brings us to another meeting.
But I
Be-
think
before-
with an in-ground pool, the water that's on the property could fall into the pool. On an above-ground pool, the only water that's getting into the pool is falling directly into the pool. I
Actually,
know that
with
it's-
actually with an in-ground pool, the requirement is it needs to be graded away from the coping, so no runoff goes into the pool.
So that it's really making
Okay.
a difference then.
All right, so then it would be a similar discount. Yeah,
I think they're the same. for
okay.
the purpose.
I would think
Yeah.
it'd be the same then.
I mean,
That-
if they have the same type of cover during the off season,
Mhm.
then it would function essentially for the purposes trying to regulate. It would function the same whether it was in ground or above ground.
Okay.
Do we have a definition for a seasonal pool, though? I mean, I think we all kind of know it when we see it, but do we have a clear definition for that?
I
I
would
can-
suggest not having a definition, just an above-ground pool.
Well, but wouldn't that then include a inflatable?
Yes, yes, it would.
So you would say that that should be considered as part of lot
If
coverage?
so, yeah, if someone's asking to put a above-ground pool, you're calling it seasonal, and I'm doing a review, I would have to do those calculations.
Have we ever gotten someone asked to put one of those up, to be perfectly honest?
I haven't been here that long.
Maybe we want the ordinance
can't
to be
imagine that.
silent. Why don't we have the ordinance be silent, not mention seasonal, we just simply say above ground.
Yeah.
That's what I'm recommending.
If someone's going to Walmart and buying one of those pools, they're not asking our permission.
They need to get approvals, they need to get permits.
I'm
And
with
it's
you.
I'm sorry, but it's regulated by the state.
I mean,
No,
that is my concern, though. I mean, I know it's maybe it seems ridiculous, but I mean, I could think of a scenario where neighbors are having a dispute and somebody uses that. Maybe somebody's kids are playing in the pool too noisily and the neighbor doesn't like it, and now they have a way to use the term weaponize. They could report them and say, I don't know. Maybe I'm going too far out, but
But if we keep it at the same discount, if we say it's a pool regardless whether it's in ground or above ground, then Steve and Artie can deal with it based on what we're doing. Unless you think there should be a different discount.
I'll remove the distinction for I'll just remove the seasonal pool and it'll just be treated as a pool.
I don't think the in-text type pools are doing any better or worse than an above ground pool. But I just know from realistically, they're not coming to us for permission, but they're not going to be any better or worse, I wouldn't think, than a regular pool in terms of catching water. So I'd probably just get rid of the seasonal one.
Okay.
I just have a feeling we're gonna have to deal with that problem at some point. It's gonna come.
If it does, then a future board can ask for a revision. I see the benefit of stability of zoning laws, but I also see that we're going through climate change. Regardless of what caused it, you could argue it was whatever you cause it. We do have some climate change. So let's move forward and see where we get. And if we have to modify again, we can always modify again based on, experience.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So Marina, we're going to need for you to incorporate these changes and send it to everybody.
Yes, I will.
And maybe, Mr. Chairman, we might be able to give some time at the next meeting and vote it up or down to move it to the council.
Yeah, I think Ed, we have what's our agenda look like for the 24th?
Ed no.
I think there's only one application on for the next meeting.
Okay.
It shouldn't take
It shouldn't
much, I
take-
would imagine. I mean, if it's just language of
If it's, yeah, if it's just
reiterating what we just discussed, couldn't imagine it would take too long, right?
It shouldn't, yeah. No, I just want to make sure we have ample time to cover it. So, Ed, if you wouldn't mind, can you include review of the revisions on the agenda for the next meeting?
Yes, I will. I'll take care of it.
Okay. Okay. Anything further on this?
I want to thank everybody for the in-depth thought, the professionalism. It really helps. I believe it's going to really help, and I believe it's a step in the right direction.
We have one more item under the discussion topic. I don't know if we want to take that on now. We did receive a letter from the Mid-Bergen Regional Health Commission concerning the use of the terminology of food handler's license in our ordinance. So I don't know if we want to.
He's here, by the way.
Hi,
Yeah,
everybody.
he's present.
Dan Dabrowski. I know I'm signed in as James Fedorko, but my name is Dan Dabrowski. I am the health official for Mid-Bergen Regional Health Commission. Jim asked me to sit on this meeting just to make a quick suggestion, since we're sticking to the topic of language and definitions in 350-4 E. There is the use of food handler's license, which is not a, there is a retail food establishment license, which the Board of Health grants, but there is no beverage or food handler's license. That is not a thing. So the suggestion would be, after the section, which is to be used as a retail food establishment as defined in NJAC 24, which is New Jersey's food code. That's the state law for restaurants and retail food establishments, whether it's mobile, temporary events. So that is the only suggestion, just to pretty much anything where it says restaurant, which is to be used as restaurant, just replace that, and which is to be used as a retail food establishment as defined by NJAC 24, which is the state code for restaurants.
Disagree.
Okay.
We use food handler's license in the past, as the board will explain to you, or even the council. We use it as leverage, and
there's a food handler's, there's a food manager's certification. There's also a food
If
handler's
I can, I'm
certification.
sorry to interrupt you, but if you just let Mr.
Sure.
Merman finish his explanation, I think
Sure.
it's a different, you'll understand when he explains his.
when we have a food handler's license, we want to look at restaurants, particularly restaurants. And in fact, we've looked at quite a number of them, and we found changes that benefited the public, especially handicap parking was in the wrong place, or had to be moved up. And likewise, we find it as a very, very useful tool. Not to take anything away from your definitions, but the board prefers, it's my opinion that the board prefers to leave it at as we handle it now. And I'll let other people opine also.
Let me let Ms. Steinley step in.
So, Mr. Merman, I think that from my understanding is that they're not requesting that the board or the borough eliminate this site plan review. It's just to change the way we talk about this type of site plan review. So there is the borough and the Mid-Bergen Regional Health Commission do not issue quote unquote food handlers licenses. They call it a retail food establishment certificate. So they just want us to update the language to match whatever certification that they provide.
Could we do that just by changing our definitions? A food handler license includes whatever you just said. But I like the term food handler's license. If you just want to change the borough's definition, even though we say food handlers, to include what you just discussed.
I think that would be a good compromise.
Yeah, I think the letter was a little a little misleading in what it was
Yep.
looking to achieve, because it's not exactly, I agree with you, Marina. I think that was probably what the ask was, or the intent behind the letter, but the letter, I think, gave a little bit of a different spin on things, in the sense that it almost could be interpreted that the request was being made to remove it from our process. But if the ask is, as Marina just said, which, and I'll let you confirm that specifically, but if that's the request that's being made here, then I think that's, I mean, subject to the board's input, I don't think that's something that couldn't otherwise be addressed.
Based off of what Jim told me, it's just a suggestion, to make the language clear and have it actually defined by, state law. But I agree, definitely not removing the site plan approval, absolutely not. It's just changing the language just to make it a little more comprehensive, and, a retail food establishment as defined as in NJAC 24, and, they clearly define it as, because here it says sit-down service, takeout service. It's just use a lot of different terms where retail food establishment would encapsulate all of that. So that is the only suggestion, just changing the language, not to remove the section.
Can I just ask a question? So I get that you're not trying to change the policy. You're just trying to get us to use the correct terminology. Something that I haven't noticed in the past, but I just found on the Borough Code is chapter 442, which is called food handler certification. Does that need to be changed? Are we,
So there is a food manager's certification or a food handler certification. Those are the two courses that we
Right.
require by NJAC 24.
Okay.
So there's different risk types of restaurants. A risk type 3 restaurant requires at least one person in charge to have a food manager's certification, and any other restaurants should have at least one person in charge. Risk type 3, 2, 1, or 4 has at least one person with a food handler's certification. So there's food managers, which is the real good one that we would like to see all restaurants really have. Some boards of health have an ordinance where they require all restaurants, retail food establishments, regardless of what risk type, to have at least one person working with a food manager's certification. Food handler's license, food handler's certification is a very simple test. It's a couple of questions, and they really get that certification very easily. So I don't really like that one. The food manager's certification is definitely a little bit more thorough.
All right. And you've made your recommendation. So thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a comment on the applications that, not a restaurant, say like a pizza parlor? We've had a couple come in, and all they're doing is just, it's a turnkey operation. They're taking over another store, and they're not changing anything. It takes a bit of time. They're a bit surprised that they have to wait and go in front of get approval from the board. Has the borough found any issues with those type of situations that things needed to be corrected?
So I think we've come across this before, where it's basically to sell the business as opposed to a change in use. So to your point, the pizzeria is going to continue operating as a pizzeria. No one really is going to, the general public would not really notice a discernible difference in what's happening there. So we've encountered situations where we've discussed in the past, it would make sense to have some sort of a streamlined process where that occurs, where somebody could certify that, there is a change of ownership and no change of operations, no change in delivery, no change in tables, no change in restaurant seating, hours of operation, deliveries, that sort of thing. So that is something we have looked at, or we have discussed in the past. To Mr. Merman's point before, even in those situations where there is a simple change, I mean, there are instances where there were certain deficiencies in some cases that needed to be corrected. It may have been striping on a parking space, for example, reconfiguring, of handicap parking spaces, if you will. Those instances where the board's review has helped to, update or correct any sort of, deficiencies that needed to be corrected, and, you know, not only to help the general public, but also to help the operation of the business. So I don't think we took formal action as a board on that quote unquote streamline process, but it's something that we should probably consider. And I think maybe to the mayor's earlier point, you know, we were talking about uses. That would be a topic that I think we should take up, you know, at that time when we're looking at other uses. But it's a good suggestion, and certainly, you know, what we don't want to be is you know, it is creating, you know, obstacles for businesses in town. You know, we want to try to, you know, make sure that you know, we don't want to unnecessarily burden them, particularly if they're new businesses or, you know, any business in general, you know, with things that you know, if there is a situation where they're all that, you know, as you say, all they're doing is just, you know, it's one party leaving and another party coming in, and you know, things are continuing as was. You know, in those instances, if there's an ability to streamline things and make things, you know, less burdensome, you know, that's something we can consider.
Yeah, I think so, because these, I would call them mom and pop type of operations. You know, they might not even have parking. You know, there might be the strip section, you know, by the crest of that area. There are still inspections that are done. The fire prevention office will go do an inspection, and Board of Health will also be in there doing inspections. So I think, yeah, I think that would help out those type of operations that are looking to start up as, and costly too, to have, you know, another burden of, you know, a cost for that mom and pop just to turnkey.
Sure, fair point. Fair point. So, okay, I think we've covered the agenda for this evening. Anybody have anything further?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Tom Behrens. Tom?
I'm here, yes.
Okay. The local news, the town news recently ran an article about Murphy signing a bill to overhaul affordable housing system. Okay. Yeah.
The doozy, yeah.
Tom, is this part of the discussion we had a while ago, where they're just going to reshuffle the deck and deal out more requirements as far as numbers are concerned?
That's exactly right. So we did touch on it at a prior meeting, I
Right.
think right after the new legislation came out. And basically the state legislature is not reinventing the wheel, they're creating a new process. So the old process is out the window.
Right.
They've kept some of the components, but they're coming up with a whole new methodology as to how to assign individual towns their affordable housing obligations and what those specific numbers will be in terms of
Okay.
units. So, right, that is what that is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot to it.
The part B of the question, I think I gotta ask it, but it seems to fall in also. We had discussed with that conversation originally came up when there was a proposed Senate bill 2847. That was, well, you know what that was. They were going to jam in
Accessory dwelling units.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing on that right now. That's still either in process or dead or whatever. Is that
So
correct?
it's separate, but it's out there. I think they have to act on it by the summer or it dies. I don't know, but with what's going on at the state level, it's anybody's guess what they'll actually do with it. I think it's a great idea as written. I think there's some issues that need to be ironed out, but again, I have no sense of which way they'll go with that.
Oh, okay. So right. All right. So you basically answered my question. The one that Governor Murphy signed was the reshuffling of the deck of cards as far as numbers were concerned.
Yeah, and that is law. We should give the board a better update because there are a bunch of timelines and things that the
All right.
borough has to do and the planning board has to do. So we should get you guys up to speed.
Okay.
shortly.
All right, great, thank you. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Merman, I will, with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn, to close the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstain? All right, we stand adjourned at 9:01 PM. Thanks, everyone.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Have a great
Good
night.
night,
everyone.
Everybody, good
Thank
night.
you.
Everyone.